Watson. All members are present and we have a quorum. For some reason, the TV is not working. They switched out some things, but I do see that Alder Peckham is on with us. He's able to hear us and everything. So our first item of business will be the election of a chair. I will open up nominations for a chair.
I would nominate, is this working? An after switch on?
Yep, it is.
Hello? Hello?
Okay. I would, I'm just deaf, I can hear myself now. I would nominate Sarah Watson to that position if she were interested.
Thank you for the nomination, but I respectfully decline.
At least you're respectful about it. Then I would just change and I would nominate Mr. Wadinsky to the, because I think the new people need to jump in.
He's going to be respectful and decline also.
Oh, this is not fair at all. Okay, well, sophomore, Mr. Martins.
I guess the process of elimination, I'll accept. Otherwise, we'll be here all night.
We would just be a chairless committee.
Yeah. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, all those who vote in favor for Alder Martins to be the chair, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Alder Martins, you are the chair. I'll have you come if you want to take this seat or if you're comfortable there.
I suppose I can sit in this.
Okay. And then I'll have you go on then to nominate a vice chair.
Okay. At least I can't be both.
All right, with the chair selected, we'll now take nominations for a vice chair.
I will start with my first one from the last go-around, because I still think the young people need to, jump in, take some of the heat off of us old folks. So I will nominate Sarah Watson for vice chair.
Watson, you accept? All right. Are there any other nominations on the floor? Not seeing or hearing any. I'll call a vote for Sarah Watson to be vice chair of the committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, let's see, item number 2. Discussion and possible action recommendation on purpose of Rules Review Committee and determination on procedures of how committee recommendations will be brought to council for approval or adoption.
I feel like this might be me. I guess maybe I'll just launch into this and then you can talk about how you want to do this. So you'll remember that maybe it was May or June that we created this committee. I based it off of how the county does this. They have a rules review committee where they usually do it at the end of the term and kind of decide, here's how things were going, this is how it works better, because you police yourselves. And we just didn't have that mechanism. As you'll remember, we all kind of voted to agree to a couple of Robert's Rules things a couple of meetings ago. So I think it'll be better for everyone to just clarify how you want to govern yourself. I know a lot of people have been looking to me also in some of the committee meetings wanting me to interject things, and I don't think that's probably wise either. So I think it'll be great for everyone to just lay out how you want to govern yourself. Am I missing something, do you think, Anne? We've been chatting a little bit about this.
I like the idea that you discussed that the outgoing council would propose draft changes or amendments to the rules based on their experience, but then the incoming council would adopt the current set of rules in effect and then have a draft before them to have something to start with at the beginning of their session. Not having had that now, and we've had a turnover in the clerk's office, I do have a file with some suggested rule changes we can continue to look at and bring forward to you a few at a time if you want to do it that way or work through a review of all of the rules, but it's Chapter 2.16 of the code, and it requires 2/3 or 8 of the 11 of you to approve any amendment to those rules. So when we get further down on the agenda, when we talk about some of those other items, I'll let you know what the default position of Robert's rules is in the event that you don't suggest recommending your own rule. But in the past, I think the council has made recommended changes on their own. Sometimes they've been brought to the committee of the whole for discussion and then brought back to council from the committee of the whole for adoption. It's really up to you folks to decide where you want to recommend directing your proposed amendments or changes, or if you want to meet monthly and do a few rules at a time, or if you want to tackle a whole bunch of them and meet quarterly and go through it that way. That's what I anticipated they would discuss. But
Yeah, and I guess I would also add that, you have 16 months left, so you don't have to feel like you can't change your rules now, because I know there's been a little bit of consternation over some of them, so
Sure.
however it is that you want to do it.
Yeah, Neil?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Attorney Jacobson, to what, just ballparky, to what degree do we adhere to or deviate from, the strictures of Robert's rules in our everyday proceedings?
Well, Robert's rules was never, you'll hear say, drafted for governmental bodies or proceedings, and it's mostly for smaller committees. It doesn't adapt well to government settings, and I've certainly found that to be true. You have rules for everything. I mean, I'm just thinking of some of the things that have come up in the past. I mean, we don't have in our ordinances anything about fining members or having required attendance or punishing people for missing so many committee meetings.
Right.
Those are some of the things you could put in there. I don't know what the default provision for that for Roberts is, but they have default provisions for like disciplinary processes that I know we've looked at in the past, because there haven't been any in the rules as long as I've been here. When we get to the time limit on speeches and number of speeches on a topic by each person, there is a default provision in Robert's rules for that, which we have not followed at all, but that's okay.
Sure.
I mean, that's why we're here, because it's a continually evolving council, and our rules should be just as flexible, really. But the statute 6211 gives you the full authority to regulate your own body. And so you discipline your own members, you can fine, expel, adjourn and demand that they appear at a meeting. You can do all kinds of things, but it's really up to the body itself to determine its rules of procedure.
Seems to me it'd be great to have sort of a laundry list or a menu of rules that might have come up for discussion or consternation. Ones that people have said, why do we do this? Why can't I do that? Why is so-and-so allowed to do this or whatever? And if we had those, we could kind of prioritize them and start, knocking them off. That would be a good way to move forward. Otherwise, I'd be kind of like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
So something like that would be very handy, I think.
I guess I would just add, some of the stuff that's on this list are those things that people have reached out to ask about, and we can
It looked like
continue.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, we'll work with the chair, and he can also determine how he wants to move forward too. And again, you don't have to vote on anything tonight. You could decide, all right, we got to talk, we got to think, we want to bundle these up and then take them to wherever.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, because there is a lot of stuff on the agenda tonight, and I don't think we're not going to be able to tackle everything, but I think we need to take a first swing at a lot of these things, and then just make a list, a laundry list of what we need to deal with moving forward, because I was, prior to this meeting, I was paging through our council rules, and not that they're incomplete, but, they're specific to how, we're going to behave, or how items will pass through a meeting. And there are certain items, pieces in the rules that are maybe absent, which would be rule number 20, or no, excuse me, rule number 19, Robert's Rules Order to Govern the Council. So we put a lot of weight on Robert's rules themselves in order to manage ourselves. And if this would give us, this committee gives us the ability to kind of fine tune things, so.
Mr. Chair, if I might also add at this point, I had a note to have you be thinking about too, whether or not you want to add clarification to the rules about whether you want these rules to apply just to the council's proceedings or to the standing committee's proceedings as well. That would give us a little more clarification, because we've had more requests for parliamentarians at committee, all committee meetings and so on and so forth. So that's not an agenda item for discussion, but we should be thinking about not only how we'll bring these rules forward, but clarifying to whom they will apply.
Okay,
Mr. Chair?
yes.
On the second item, the discussion and possible action, the second line where it says, "and determination of procedures of how committee recommendations will be brought to council for approval, adoption." Is that this committee or any committee that we're talking about there? Do we know?
It's a good question. I would think, wouldn't it be this committee? Because if there was, if somebody's going to suggest a rules change, wouldn't it have to flow now through the rules committee and then brought to the council?
Well, it is asking for recommendations, so I mean, I'm just not quite sure if it's really just for self-governance of this committee or something procedural to cover all committees. I don't know whoever wrote that, what they were thinking when they wrote it.
I just would ask that I can't hear.
Yeah,
So if you're
put it-
having,
Turn on your microphone, say.
yeah, I mean, I have this guy, he's gesticulating in the back because this is being taped, so.
I don't have any specific clarity on that, so I guess you can interpret it. I mean, I think probably we wanted to figure out how you wanted to pass through the rules to the next level to pass or fail at the council level. So I don't know if there's a natural flow outside of this committee, but it doesn't seem like it.
Seemed like to me that what Ann was mentioning, like, would our recommendations go directly to council to be approved, or would it go to a committee of the whole and then go back to council to be approved?
I would myself like it go directly to council. We are, I think this should be as any other committee, to do that, we were put on this committee, that we can function as a committee and go to council. To go back to committee of the whole, I think is just going to kind of confuse our direction. I think the more we keep things consistent, the better right now.
Yeah, Tom?
Yeah, I would just add that, yeah, our recommendations, are like any other committee would, if they pass here or whatever, if they go to council, that's fine. I would just hope that any recommendation we make is, goes through some sort of, staff vetting process to make sure we're not being inappropriate.
We want it all constitutional, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, if it's, sending something to the committee of the whole first, that gives everybody two kicks at the can, and it's, I don't see, I see that as counterproductive, so.
Do we need to make a motion of any sort, or no?
Plus, the committee of the whole is not a standing committee, and I think items are supposed to come to council through a standing committee, but I agree with you, it makes sense to bring it from rules review directly to council, so we'll tweak that other rule in there. And to Tom's point, it's already in there as part of the ordinance. The council may not vote on any ordinance or an amendment to it, the language, unless it's been reviewed for its enforceability and attested to by the city attorney. So we'll probably always have one or two people at these meetings to assist you, and Nathan's here tonight because he got ADA questions about how our rules might accommodate persons with disabilities. So I think he sent you a notice in advance of the meeting. That's why he's present tonight. So thanks, Nate. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Chair.
No, that's, you're fine. So do we have a motion?
I would move that we follow standard committee processes in making recommendations to council.
Okay. Second by Wadinsky. So a motion's made and seconded to follow standing committee procedures in bringing rules changes or recommendations to the council. All those in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? And it carries unanimously. Okay, well, that was painless. All right, item number 3. Discussion and possible action, recommendation regarding council members requesting to speak during meetings. And point A, time limits. Point B, number of times council members allowed to speak on the same topic. And point C, council member requests to reopen discussion on a topic or bringing a topic back before the body for discussion or action. And I don't know if you want to tackle each of these points separately, or do you want to tackle them as a whole, or what, so.
May I quick introduce the first item?
Go ahead.
And then they can discuss. That's A, time limits. The
Yeah.
default position for Robert's Rules is under 43.8, and it says, well, in a non-legislative body or organization that has no rule relating to the length of speeches, a member once having obtained the floor while a debatable motion is pending can speak no longer than 10 minutes unless they get, continuously, unless they get the consent of, the unanimous consent of the assembly, or it's passed by a 2/3 approval of a motion to extend the limit of their debate. So 10 minutes is the default
It's the default, okay.
time limit on speeches.
And then is that a one-shot deal of 10 minutes?
Yeah,
Or
is that per, I mean, if they could speak multiple times, is that 10 minutes per, or 10 minutes
Well,
total?
then you move on to number of times they're each allowed to speak on the same topic. And I believe that says unless you have a special rule providing otherwise, no member may speak more than twice to the same question on the same day.
Okay,
Except there's special rules for appeals. The chair gets to speak twice, but otherwise it says that members are limited to speaking twice to the same topic. So I would guess 2 different 10-minute periods each.
Mayor?
Right, I just want to let you know that the county board has a rule governing their own, that's different than Robert's rules. They allow members to speak 3 times on a topic, and if you want to speak 4 times, the whole body has to vote on whether or not you can do that. They don't put time limits on that part of it, although it doesn't tend to go on past 10 minutes.
You have, yeah, okay. I suppose you have to be really motivated to talk more than 10 minutes, so.
Filibuster, you never know.
Well, Mr. Chair, I mean,
Yes.
there is the instances where a member may have been requested by a committee or council to give a presentation. So I think we need to differentiate between something like that versus their request to speak on a topic. You know, if they go, yes, I would like to speak, you know. And that I could see being under that, you know, the 10-minute or number of time allowances or whatever. But if somebody were here to do a presentation on something, you know, their speaking could go to 15, 20, 25 minutes, depending.
But that would this would pertain to council members.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so
Yeah,
if
but
a council member,
if for some reason a council member had a particular, you know, presentation or, you know, request to
Okay.
share with the body.
sir,
Could we just differentiate between, like, for time limits for speaking on a specific motion? Because then they wouldn't be giving a presentation on a motion. That would be just them talking to the point, right? So,
And the time limit part actually does say, talking when an immediate motion is pending. So they're speaking to a motion that's on the floor, they're in the middle of discussion or debate, which differentiates it from a presentation, but they don't differentiate with regard to that and the number of times you can speak. But I suppose if they were doing a presentation, would you count that as once, and then they can only speak once when that topic, let's say, upon which the presentation was made, comes up then for a motion and debate, then they're only allowed to speak once or twice when that motion's pending?
Yeah, I would just think that you just, the same for any motion.
Discount the
Right.
presentation.
Yeah, I would think
So
so.
apply that the time limit and the number of times when a debatable motion is pending. Yeah, okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
oh,
Sorry.
oh, sir,
is 10 minutes a little excessive? I don't know.
It's-
Thinking like 5?
It's a lot of time. 10 minutes is a lot of time.
And if the goal is to get a succinct argument.
It's a really good point. I mean, I know sometimes I've found myself getting rather on my soapbox over here, but I'll bet you it probably goes 4 or 5 minutes tops, even though it might seem like an hour for everybody that's listening.
Well, how many times do we have public comment and the citizens speak longer than 3 minutes?
Sure.
So it can happen, especially if somebody, if a member's got a prepared statement they want to make on a motion, so.
Well, if we would make it only 5 minutes, then you could do like 3 times, speak 3 times to a point, or, then you
Yeah.
could have more of a debate back and forth versus just one person talking.
I was going to say, Mr. Chair, if I might, that, I'm all for, let's get this thing over and then make our decision, so, we're not here all night. But, sometimes, and not infrequently, a topic is very robust, and there's a lot to be said about it back and forth. And I'm a little concerned about the limiting the number of times one might speak to it, because it's like, because somebody might make a point, which is new. This has not come up in the discussion before. And I go, bing, well, I can't talk now because I've already talked my talk, But I sure would like to say something about that. How does that work?
You could request the consent of your colleagues to speak one more time to the topic.
Okay. Yeah, maybe not even one more time, but request, because again, after you say whatever, that, when bing with me, Sarah might say something totally different, and that would bing again, some other way. And I would like maybe be able to request to speak again to that point,
Yeah. I agree with Tom, and I think that happens more than you think. It's like even if somebody calls up a staff member and asks some questions, and all of a sudden, now that brings up another question I would like to bring either answered or I want it publicly answered. So that's where, at least that's how we used to function before. So I don't want to lose that effort, and I certainly agree we need to limit the times or whatever's happening with the stream of consciousness discussions, but I really don't want to limit getting, being transparent, or our ability to be transparent.
I think in the Roberts rules, questions are not counted as part of that. Questions, if you're asking a question of a staff member, that doesn't count against your time. Or, number of times.
To quote, page 43 or 43, merely asking a question and this came up before in one of our heated committee meetings, merely asking a question or making a brief suggestion is not counted as speaking in debate, nor is the making of a secondary motion counted as speaking in debate.
So, Tom, or Jim,
Either one.
I'm looking at you.
I think we should differentiate committee meetings and council meetings with these rules. They should not be the same, because committee meetings is more discussion, more talk, more questions on things that are happening. And then when that committee is done and has a solution to that problem, then if it goes to council, council can look back at those meeting minutes, get all their questions that they need to out of that discussion that they had, and hopefully most of them were answered. And then at council, they should be more streamlined and maybe be able to go a little quicker with less question or just some thinking.
No, I would agree, the work should be done in committee, and so they should, committee members shouldn't be hamstrung by not being able to comment and ask questions and have discourse back and forth. But by the time we do get to council, I think we need to either, you need to be able to formulate your case and lay it out succinctly, and then not give us this the back and forth is good, but it's got to be moderated at some point, because you get to a certain point where after about going back and forth 3 or 4 times, now you're beating a dead horse, so. Yeah, Tom?
I, on an occasion or 2 or 7, as a chair, in the interest of, not like, hurrying up and getting out of here, but, keeping on task, have, called like an out of order sort of statement, saying, well, what is being said now by a member is not within the scope of what we're discussing or voting on here. It's kind of like going to left field and, to try to rein that back in. And in doing so, saying, well, that's out of order, or it's not germane to what we're talking about. I've kind of gotten some grief about, silencing people or taking over or being a tyrant or whatever. Thoughts on the role of the chair in committee with regards to maintaining on-point flow? Anybody?
I'm full of comments tonight if you'd like to hear from me. You're absolutely right. I mean, and you have every right to do that. It's a rule of debate. You can certainly object, that is a point of order, and you turn to the chair and you say point of order, and they say, what's your objection, Alder Neal? And you say, this person has now strayed so far from the agendized topic, it's no longer germane. That is a totally legitimate point of order, and it's up to the chair to rule on your point of order. Now, if the chair wants to turn to the parliamentarian and say, gee, what do you think? I don't know what to do. Is that such a thing? Germaneness? Yes, it is. Well, what do you think? Do you think it's germane? Why or why not? I'll give my opinion to that person or interpret that rule for them, but it's still really up to the chair to rule on your point of order. But that's typically how it's done, and I've responded in that format to several of you. I don't know which alders sent me questions, but that's how I responded.
If I could just follow up, Ann, on the same kind of point. As a chair, and I've read up on this, and I feel pretty comfortable with it, but I kind of like to formalize it within the, our Rules Committee. If I give an opinion on what's before us as a chair, have I, tried to, take over or, lord over, or am I overstepping my role as chair? Am I supposed to be neutral and unaffected about what's being talked about and let everybody else talk about it and then vote on it? Or can I say, I think this is a really good idea?
I think you're confused. No, that's a very good question. You're not confusing it, but that's the confusion some people have between an initial ruling of the chair and then an appeal. So no, you're not out of order. You're not cutting them off. You're not imposing yourself on them. That's the duty of the chair, is to say, I'm ruling on this. So-and-so, you are out of order because your topic isn't, your discussion's no longer germane, stop talking. Now, if that person then wants to appeal the chair's order,
I'm
then
talking
they can
about
ask
something
the
different.
whole body what they want.
I'm talking about, as a chair, offering an opinion on what the discussion before us is all about.
Oh, you absolutely have a
motion.
right to
I
participate
think
in the
this is a great
discussion.
project.
And vote. I'm sorry, yes, absolutely you do. I missed that boat
Right.
altogether. You're absolutely
I've kind of
right.
gotten, some grief for, having an opinion about what we're talking about.
No, the chair doesn't have to absent themselves from the discussion or vote.
Okay,
So.
thank you. Yeah, and this something, a little something like that in our, summary of rules, I think might be handy.
Question, can the chair make a motion or second a motion?
Yes, we can. I asked that because in HR, nobody would second something that I was for, and so I asked, Nathan, and yes, we can, so.
I never knew that.
Wow.
So along the lines, Tom, like Rule 7 in our standing rules, it talks about the presiding officer, but could something be sort of copied over for chairs of committees then? Similar to what is worded there, and then you have more clarification?
Rule 7 is presiding officer for a council meeting.
But then couldn't we sort of duplicate that like, language for, like, chairs, right? Or make it something similar.
For committee chairs?
Yeah. I mean, if Tom wants more clarity on his role and what he can do as a chair.
I think there's Rule 13 talks about committees, and it does not specify anything about presiding officers of a committee. So,
I'd probably recommend putting it under voting, Rule 9, and just mentioning that a chair of any committee or a chair of a standing committee or a special committee or however you want to limit it has the right to make second motions and vote and debate any topic before it.
okay. But that doesn't really have anything, should we, but that doesn't talk, we're talking about time limits and not committee not motions, so I don't know how we're kind of a little bit off topic then.
I don't know, I think we've kind of gotten by time limits. I think that what we maybe want to get clear in our recommendations is the use of the call to question. And can that be called by a member and a chair? Can a chair say, feeling that, this discussion has really, gone 360 degrees and we're right back where we started and we've covered everything. And I would offer that we call the question and ask the committee to vote on calling the question. Is that the best way to handle the number of times speaking or the time limits for speaking?
It would certainly be permissible, and it's something that I know in my tenure here, we've seldom used it, although it's,
Yeah, I'm on my 7th, going on 8th year or whatever, and I've heard the term call the question, I think, less than this many times.
yeah.
You too?
Sadly, in the first term of mine, I've actually called the question.
Yeah,
which is-
right.
It's been more this term than any other, I think.
I still think
Yeah.
we should have time limits. I think that should be part of our
Yeah.
rules. Like,
Yeah.
we need to not just rely on calling the question. Then you have more guidelines going in.
Who's going to time this? I think we have to look at how this is going to be applied. We are going to have members that are going to complain that it's not applied equally. We have to look ahead at how this is going to be applied, I think. And, who's going to say, okay, with the timer and keep up how many times people are speaking to a subject or a motion. That will have to be very laid out in these kind of things instead of just that, because it will be questioned, believe me.
Yeah. Mayor?
Yeah, I was thinking it might even be helpful, when people are coming up and they're talking, the members of the public, I'm timing them on my phone. I don't know if you know that, but maybe we could have a digital clock that just kind of ticks down. We could just restart it every time. I mean, I would need help with it, but I think it would help everybody to have that.
If that clock were visible, it would help the speaker too.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. I
Yeah.
don't want to keep interrupting people constantly.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's I'd like the idea of some kind of time limit. I don't like the idea of absolute limits, I do like the idea of the body having the ability amongst itself to determine and vote that even though maybe one or two members, want to, go till the wee hours on something, that the body says, no, I think we've covered this and we're ready to act. And that's, part of what call the question is all about. So, some hybrid that incorporates a reasonable time limit type thing. I think the number of times that somebody can speak, I don't really want to go there because, as we've said, the discussion can keep enriching itself, and you don't want to feel like, oh, damn it, I'd like to talk, or I have to ask permission again, but, have I said my 3, or do I only get 2, or, oh, so-and-so got 4, I don't know.
So you're suggesting that we adopt a time limit, but not the number of times a member is allowed to speak?
Yeah, I'm thinking that the way to handle the number of times a member speaks might be handled with the call to question type
Question.
thing. If it feels like it's being redundant, you know.
Question
Becky?
about call the question. The only thing about that is that if everybody has their, okay, let's say that somebody's meandering down the lane again, and we are talking, and 3 other people have their light on, and you're like, I want to call the question, we have to wait, correct? Until we're called upon to call the question?
Actually, no, and I'm not sure how good a parliamentarian Leslie is. She can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we've not always done that correctly. We've been courteous and polite to the members of the body and said, well, okay, you had your light on before the motion was made, so the mayor will continue to call on those whose lights were on. However, I believe that when a motion to call the question is made, that stops debate at that point, and you have to vote then on whether to call the question. And if the majority wants to call the question, there is no more debate. I mean, so you really, it really is a way to cut people off, and then they don't like it. But I agree with Tom that that's a good way to regulate it, except then you're at the mercy of your peers. You don't have the right to speak 2 or 3 or 4 times, but I agree with you. I think it's really hard to limit the number of times people can speak because you never know where a debate or a conversation is going to go and be enriched. But then you'd have a right to speak so many times by virtue of your rules. This way, you're just hoping that you can continue to talk as many times as you want, and nobody's going to call the question, because it is seen as a ploy that somebody might use. Somebody might see it as an abuse to cut off debate. Or you could make a point of order. Well, germaneness wouldn't really cover the number of times somebody's talked, but
Can a chair overrule a request to call the question?
No, I don't think
No,
so. It's
no,
not
I believe
debatable
so.
by anyone.
no. I think it stops debate at that point, and you have to vote on whether to call the question. And if everybody says yes, then you're calling the question.
Yeah, the body can vote not to call the question and continue debate. So, Mayor?
Yeah, I would just say that this was something that was used kind of weaponized, calling the question at county board. And we did change the rules so that you could call the question, but if anybody had already been in queue to request to speak, they were still allowed to speak. So it seemed to take care of anybody calling the question to cut people off.
And we could write that into our rules too, that if your light's already on when such a motion's made, that you'll be recognized to speak. It's an option.
Yeah. Jim?
I think calling the question should be something that we try not to use, because we don't want to stifle anybody from giving their opinion and talking, even though we want them to stay on topic. I think for now, I can't see us really changing any rules at this meeting, but we should be on deck to be more conscious of what we need to look at, what some other communities are doing with their rules, and to make sure the chair is more on task to control the meeting. But it's good discussion. We should go through all this.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree, and it's, calling the question it can be a tool, but it can be, it could be a nuclear option too, kind of a weapon
Yeah, it's a good point.
if you want to stifle the debate, so.
I guess I would just add one more thing. It feels like there are certain topics where calling the question is a worse idea than others, especially when you're talking about budgets or finances or things like that that cost money. We had a couple of people call the question on budget items, and it just feels wrong because the taxpayers deserve that. They deserve deliberation on everything, but especially those issues.
You can't limit what types of issues you can call the question on, can you?
I have no idea.
So I don't think that would be a safe move in the long run.
I would recommend against it. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But that just doesn't feel good to me from a free speech standpoint or anything else. I don't think I'd
Perhaps
do
in
that.
Mr. Jarrett, perhaps in our rules eventually, at some point, that we outline, the appropriate use of call the question, and just spell it out. Say, if a member, after, robust discussion or whatever, feels that, there's no advancement in the discussion, then it's okay to call the question, but not something to just stifle
Yeah.
ongoing conversation.
I mean, maybe I'm going far afield here, but, maybe one of the things that we haven't had the benefit of doing is that, kind of in-person retreat. And that's something where you talk about council norms, and not just rules, but norms, where we can kind of discuss this. And maybe that's something we do need to have, is just, hey, here's what we're thinking. It's not a rule, but, this is really how we should behave with each other when it comes to decorum.
I know there's information out there because I've read articles in the League of Municipalities about parliamentary procedure, and they've written extensively on calling the question and how it should be used, because there are bodies that misuse it, so it's something that we should be aware of. And yeah, I would agree that would be a perfect venue on talking about issues like that, so. Okay, so we've kind of hashed out time limits, number of times council members allowed to speak on the same topic. And then there's point C, council member request to reopen discussion on a topic, bringing a topic back before the body for discussion or action. Do we want to kind of bundle all three of these into an action, something actionable, or do we want to take the first 2 points into a motion and then the third one, or?
Should that process be something that is a part of the agenda building process rather than something live? I mean, because if it's not on the agenda, bringing it back would be bringing something forward to discuss that nobody in the public was aware was going to be discussed. But if I wanted to bring a topic back, why wouldn't I talk to the chair or to the mayor and say, I'd like to bring that topic back for further discussion. Could you please add that to the upcoming agenda?
Well, would this have to do with failed motions then? If a motion fails, you can bring it back, or?
I don't really remember where this one came from, so apologies. I guess.
I think a failed motion can only be asked to be brought back by those that voted to fail it. One of those that voted to fail it rather than
The prevailing side
the
would have to
prevailing
bring-
side, is that how
It
that
can't
works?
be the same meeting either, can it?
Yeah, we already have rules for reconsideration of a question and then reintroduction of a failed resolution.
Yeah.
Yep. I didn't know what this item meant. I thought maybe it was to reopen it like during the same meeting, but later in the business agenda or something. I wasn't sure. I thought there was some genesis for it, but I thought it meant to reopen it during the same meeting, but let's say after you've already taken a vote and then maybe, I don't know, something comes to light or you decide before you adjourn that you want to reopen something or bring it back up.
Can you do that?
I wasn't sure.
Yeah. I mean, once action is taken on an item, can you revisit it in the same meeting if it's on the agenda?
That's a good question.
I thought that there was a standard where it could only be brought back by a member of the prevailing side. That seems to be what I recall, but it's a little dim. So if let's say, something I wanted to happen failed, then, I can't just ask to bring it back again.
That's a reconsideration of a question. It says any member who voted with the prevailing side on any question may move for a reconsideration of the vote immediately after the vote is taken, so you can do it during the same meeting, or at the next succeeding regular meeting of the council. If a motion to reconsider is defeated, it may not be again reconsidered by council. That's reconsideration of a question. So that's just anybody who voted on the prevailing side of any question. The resolution one, the reintroduction, let's see, that one's back here. Is it 6? Reintroduction restricted. Yep, Rule 6B. Unless otherwise provided by city ordinance, no proposed ordinance or resolution having once been defeated may again be introduced in the same or substantially same form until at least 30 days after the date it was defeated.
Anybody can do it then?
Yep.
I think that covers that topic.
Yeah. I mean, we can, we can always, if we feel this item needs to be revisited, we can always put it on a future agenda. So, and just deal with points A and B at this point. Okay, so, I guess to kind of move things forward, do I hear a motion on time limits and/or number of times a member can speak?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would suggest we postpone this till our next meeting before we make a decision, so we can have more time to review and get some input from other communities on what they're doing and what may be working with them.
Okay, that's fine by me.
Unless a motion comes about, that's fine. I mean, I don't want to rush into something, but I think some action needs to be taken on some of these, but let's do a little slowly and make sure we're doing the right thing.
Mr. Chair, I mean, what we could,
Yes.
if somebody wanted to make a motion and say, 8 minutes rather than 10 or whatever, that, we could sort of work that into a draft document rather than a recommendation, but get a draft document and say, right now, we're thinking perhaps something like 8 minutes for time limit. B, we're thinking, this for a number of times, no limits, unless we decide somebody wants to have a number of limits
Yeah.
or whatever, a number limit. But if we had a draft document, at least started for us to kind of look at our next meeting and say, all right, I've been thinking about this and I don't think we should do this or whatever.
And I want to see the separate rules for committees and council.
Yeah, no, I like the idea of looking to see what other communities do and how that works for them, so.
Well, you have a motion pending now on the floor to postpone, so you need to ask for a second and
Okay.
then take a vote on that. And if that fails, you can go back to suggesting a draft be prepared.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to postpone this for a future meeting in a second? All right, any other further discussion? Not hearing any, all those in favor, say aye.
Hi,
Aye.
Aye, opposed? All right, that carries. So we'll solicit input from other communities and put that on our next agenda, I guess. So,
Is that something staff could compile from?
Yes.
Thank you.
okay. Good deal.
I would just add, not only other communities, but the county board is a good, parallel sort of reference point.
Yeah.
I consider them a community.
All right. Item number 4, discussion and possible action or recommendation on the council member closed session participation. Point A, participation in a closed session, in-person versus virtual. And point B, voting in closed session, in-person versus virtual. And I think currently, doesn't everybody have to be here for closed session? Because we changed, initially with COVID, we changed the rules. You could be virtual for closed session, but I believe we rescinded that in
Right.
last fall.
Yeah, we now have it so that you must be here in person to participate. And that means listening, speaking, or voting, so.
Do we want to make any changes or recommendations or? Tom
Since-
and then Jim.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Seeing, the need that we've had and how it has worked for us in voting, just on regular things, and our ability to, shut her down and go into closed session, even right in here, tells me that until such time as, all of us being here is a reasonably safe, proposition, I would prefer that participating and voting virtually is not really virtual. I mean, you're here. You're just not here physically, you're here right there. If we can see you and we can hear you and you can hear us and see us or whatever, you're here. And we should be able to keep that as a tool until such time as we don't need that tool.
Okay. And Jim?
Has this been a problem?
It was a problem. We had a session back there that, it was a glitch, and we had people, public here, and whatever was happening there was being fed into here. So they heard the entire closed session, and that kind of kablooied everything. We just kind of said, we're going to shut it down. But I think I've been home, and I've been listening to closed session, that was in here. They continued it in here. I think it may have been ED. And I listened, but I could not vote.
I guess I would also add that I did hear some concerns from folks that people were not alone or in private during these closed session, or that they were communicating with people that weren't members of the body. So I guess that was the other kind of deciding factor, was the technology, but also the concern that they're not keeping it confidential.
Yeah.
I never even thought of that.
Yeah.
Well,
I was going to bring up that point exactly, because one of the, the reason we go into closed session is to speak confidentially. And really, you're not supposed to bring any kind of electronic devices into closed session, so.
I guess, and this is something that I asked the League of Municipalities, because, we're all still kind of discussing on one of their leadership calls, and they were surprised that this would be a concern at all. They basically, like, their council norms are that we're in private, we expect you to be private, maybe you should require everybody to have their cameras on or something, I don't know. So they didn't view it as a problem, but obviously we're different.
Virtual closed session, they didn't view as a problem.
Nope.
Okay.
The city attorneys around the state view it as a problem. I don't know about the mayors, but I'll tell you that we've all had discussions on our weekly Zoom calls, not to disagree with the mayor. Maybe they just weren't
We
having
do disagree on
issues.
things, actually, sometimes, so
But
I get it.
they were saying the same thing. I mean, somebody, not that any of our alders would do that, but you could be sitting in a bar somewhere and have your phone on, whatever conversation's going on in there, and have it being broadcast live as in real time. I mean, you have no idea. And so most all of them require that they be here in person. They don't even let them phone in and listen in, or not talk, or ask questions, but not vote. You're either here in that room, whether it's in here or privately in there, whether you've got the technology or not, or you're just not part of that closed session. I think that's generally how they feel. Or was it Madison? It was one city that said you can appear virtually, but then we have to see you on camera in your full body, and we have to be able to, at the beginning of the meeting, they make them scan the room so they know where they are and that they're alone in the room. And then they have to sit like in full view of like the camera with their hands out, so they're shown that they're not like IMing somebody on the side to get questions to ask in closed session, and
Holy smokes.
creating walking quorums and negative quorums and all the other stuff that cool technology allows us to do now without a thought.
Yeah. Sarah?
So,
And to do closed session, we can do it in here, right? So we can be far enough away. So doing it in person, it should still be safe. And then, you get enough notice that there's going to be a closed session in the agendas and the packets. So, I don't know, I think.
I
in
also
person's probably
think that
smart.
we are trying to limit closed sessions to absolutely necessary since COVID too. I think we've had a lot less than we usually do. And, we're trying to decrease them anyway, but there have been some on ED that we just decided we don't need closed sessions. So I think that's a good, direction to keep going, is limit closed session, but I agree, I think it needs to be in person since we did have some questions. So Alder Neal asked me to make a motion, so I will make a motion that in our rules, we continue with the rules as we have them currently, that all closed session needs to be in person for participation, listening in, and voting.
Okay. And motion on the floor and seconded, Beckley, and seconded by Neal, that closed session needs to be attended in person and voted on in person. Any further discussion?
And so
Sure.
that includes like not listening in, nobody can listen in from outside. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any other discussion? All right, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it carries. Well, that's good. And if we can always change, it. Rules are fluid, so we can always change them in the future, so. Number 5, council member contact information on city website.
I will just tell you, I got a couple of complaints from some alders who were being called because information is not listed for everybody. We don't have a rule against what you need to list on the website. We don't have a norm, so I don't have any reason to say certain things can or cannot be listed, so.
Our, on our website, are our addresses, our home addresses listed? They are, okay,
They
I haven't
should be,
looked in
shouldn't they?
a long time. In this day and age, that bothers me. I mean, in ways I never would have expected, and I'm rather concerned about that now. I think just the same way that a lot of people are concerned about their safety at home for other reasons. I don't really like it. I like being able to respond to an email. I'm fine responding to a voicemail and having my phone number out there. If I don't recognize a number, I usually don't answer. I wait for a voicemail, and then I'll get back to them if they leave me a message. Those are two legitimate and reasonably safe methods of communication. I don't want anybody knocking at my door with a complaint, and I don't want them throwing anything at my house either.
Okay, Mayor?
I'll also let you know that because of the recent kind of craziness with the school board, they took all of the addresses off of the website because of that concern. You did have people kind of showing up and threatening to protest or drawing with, various things in front of their house. And I believe, and Leslie might be able to confirm, but I believe if somebody, it's an open record. I mean, it's on your nomination papers, it's on all of this, so it's not like it's hidden, but it obviously takes a little bit more work to get it.
Jim?
Yeah, I think taking the address off would probably be prudent. I mean, it's all public information, and it's pretty easy to find an address if you know what you're doing, but it's just not readily available if we remove it. So that wouldn't be a problem removing it. It'd probably be a good idea. And, what else was I gonna say? With regard to phone numbers, on our website, I had my city email put on there as the primary, and then if they click on it, then they can get the phone number if they want, because my first contact preference is by email, because I'll respond to that quicker, because that's a city email. I'm doing a city function. The phone number is my personal phone number, and I'll answer constituents' questions on my personal number, but I don't always get to them right away. That just goes to answering machine.
Yeah, no, I'm just looking at the list of alders here, and everybody's got their address and their phone number, with the exception of you, Jim, so you just have your email down there.
I think that from an accessibility standpoint, maybe not so much ADA as economic equality or whatever, people that are email deficient but might know how to use a telephone, they would probably need that avenue rather than go, I don't know how to do email, I don't have a computer, et cetera, et cetera. So I would vote for the phone number being out there.
I haven't had a problem, personally, I haven't had a problem with people calling me. I know I've had people call me, but I haven't had any negative calls, I should say, so.
The reason I changed, because the response won't be as quick
Yeah, no.
for me. And my phone number is available. If you click on there anywhere, phone number pops up.
It goes to the machine a lot of times. I filter almost all of my calls, so,
Saying some people can't click.
yeah.
So, I mean, they just don't have a computer. They don't
Sure.
know how to do
Well,
that.
I have many friends with a computer, yeah.
I think Alder Neal's point and Jim's agreement's well taken. Do we need to wait for a rule change to agree that it might be a very prudent time to just remove the addresses from the website? I don't think we need a rule change for that. I think we should just, the mayor can order that. remove your addresses for safety and security reasons, and not having been an alder, but having heard anecdotally over
Yeah.
the years about some of the calls you get, I have heard of people showing up at people's homes, and in one case, walking into someone's home while they're sitting at the dinner table. I mean, it's quite jolting, and I don't think you signed up for that when you decided to run for public office, so.
I will tell you, I had a couple of parades go by my house this last election cycle. It doesn't bother me. It does bother my neighbors. It bothers the people I live with, so just a.
I know, I've got a constituent that likes to visit me, but they're harmless. But I suppose, it could be something, something totally worse too, so.
At a minimum, though, I think your emails should be out there. Those are city assigned, but like you said, how do we accommodate somebody who might not have access to a computer or email? But that's up to you folks to decide what else you think amongst yourselves should be appropriate to be published out there. But I would support taking the addresses off immediately.
I'm fine with phone number and email address and leave it at that.
For the ADA guide, correct?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, well, if they don't have access to the computer, then you removing your address from the website, they will never know. But anyway, no, that's not an ADA violation of you removing your address. They have a right to access to meetings. I don't think you're going to be having meetings at your house, so no.
I would also say every single person here has a mailbox. So people, there were letters, as long as you got in the habit of checking that. That was something that they did at the county before every meeting. I guess it was the clerk would put out the mail that everyone got, so.
Yeah.
Have they ever considered giving like extensions to older people at the city, through the city switchboard?
I have no idea.
Like a call
That's another
forward?
really good question, yeah, for just phone calls, for getting messages that you could retrieve, we could talk to CCITC about that. The only other alternative I thought of would be giving you cell phones and issuing you city-issued cell phones, but that would be something you'd have to work out with. We could talk with
But even, like,
CCITC.
Just an extension, because we have our own
Right,
devices.
just
we
like the employees
yeah.
would have where you can leave messages, yeah, then all you need is a PIN to retrieve it, that seems like a good idea.
Then you could take your personal number off.
If we go to a extension like that, would that be something that we could set the pop-up on our emails, that we have a message waiting? So, because I wouldn't probably want to look at that every day unless if there's nothing there.
With Cisco Jabber, I think. I'm not the tech guru, but I think that's possible, yes.
Good idea. Wish I
Or it
would've
could be
thought of that.
emailed to you when you could listen to, I'm just
That's a
thinking of
great,
different ways.
that's a great suggestion. Because then we could list on there city email addresses and city extensions, and say mail may be addressed to this alder at 407 Grant Street, and it goes into your mailbox. Right. Remove any personal references, personal emails, home addresses.
Yeah,
I mean, we would redact that if it were in a printed record otherwise, and
Right.
somebody made an open record request.
But
so-
yeah, it may stop some of these 3 in-the-morning phone calls and things like that. I don't know, maybe I'm just blessed. But at 3 in-the-morning, 5 in-the-morning, people coming to my house and people driving by saying very nasty things to me and my children. So if at all we could, limit that, that would be great. Because this is my only line, so I can't turn it off, I mean, people say, turn it off.
Exactly.
It's like, no.
I'll definitely check into that.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea.
Super idea.
I don't think we need to take action on that then. We'll just
We can report back, I think.
report back on that. So, okay. Let's see. Number 6, use of personal devices during meetings or technology issues.
Do you want me to kind of explain this one?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
So I'm just trying to, okay, so everyone is offered an opportunity to have an iPad. That's something that the city provides, and some folks don't want that. They would rather use maybe a laptop or whatever it is. But one of the struggles that we have from a city side is that we don't know what else is on your laptop, we can't troubleshoot, we're not, that's not what we're here to do, to troubleshoot on personal computers. And so I think this came about as a way of kind of, encouraging folks to use the technology that is provided. If they need training, we want to help. But, we did run through some of the struggles with remote voting and muting and unmuting and some of it, like, it really, I think we're finally to a place where this maybe isn't quite as strenuous on everybody, but there's still that propensity, I think, so, yeah.
Jim?
The couple of laptops I see at council are not city-owned?
I don't think so. Mine is city-owned, but
That's not really good for the person if that would be requested that they get information off there. Wouldn't they have to give them their personal information too?
Well, so this item I took a little bit differently too. I thought it also meant use of any other personal devices other than city-owned versus personal, like laptops or iPads. I mean, not that I've heard any of you are doing this, but it's done in other cities. People are on their phones, they're texting people outside of the council meeting, people are texting them. I mean, it distracts from your ability to focus on the discussion and engage in the debate. Closed session, of course, that's off limits, but, and if you're IMing each other, now you're having a whole private discussion, which is supposed to be open and public to the constituents. So really, to my mind, the use of these, in addition to whatever city-issued device you're given, is just asking for trouble with the violation of the open meeting law. That's the way I look at it. I would just say don't refrain from talking about business or instant messaging or tweeting or whatever you do during meetings with other people or outside, because it's just not worth the risk of violating the law.
Just to be devil's advocate, anybody who's a family person, there could be a family situation that comes up and somebody's trying to alert a council person that, Junior just cracked his head open, or, my car died on the freeway, or whatever. And certainly, that has to be an open avenue at all times.
I agree. I mean, I have a disabled child, so that's why I keep it. I always, you'll see me put it out there, but I don't. I am people here. I don't even know their numbers.
Yeah.
But I also agree that, people do have, I've had a family emergency during council, when my dad was dying. So I had to run. That was last term. And, I saw the text and I knew what it was and I had to run. So I don't want to limit that. I mean, so how do we just warn people?
I did not mean to do that. I'm not suggesting you make a rule that says, no, we're going to examine your desks and nobody ever better have anything there but an iPad. I guess I'm just saying refrain from engaging in these personal things or having debate about the city business when it's not open. I guess that's really just my advice. It's not that you can't bring them. I don't bring mine, but I have on occasion brought my cell phone for the same reason. If I know that I might be expecting something, I've had to do the same thing on occasion. So I don't think anybody's saying you can't do that, not at all.
I think it's probably, maybe it's just a clarification that, hey, you can have a walking quorum on your cell phone, texting somebody, and a reminder that don't do it during a meeting.
Exactly.
That's maybe another
it.
norm that we should establish, and maybe it needs to be in the rules, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Because to Jim's point, I mean, anything you carry on, whether it's on a city email address or a private computer, if it's city business, we've had people suggest go take somebody's personal devices and then we'll go through them. And they're like, no, you can't do that. That's my personal computer. Well, then you need to give up the business stuff, related stuff on there to us. Otherwise, we're going to go through it, see all your personal email. We won't release that, but it's still going to be seen. So just depends how comfortable people are using those devices and maintaining them on their own.
I think that's another thing that maybe it just deserves clarity, that it's not about where the record is. It's the fact that it is a record about a public kind of discussion point. So if it's in your Facebook Messenger, well, it's still a public record. So, or it still could be classified as such.
Yeah.
So back to the question of non-city issued, like laptops, rather than using the city issued iPads. Is there any potential ADA issues with regards to somebody saying, I can't work with an iPad, I need my laptop because I have bad eyes, or, it's too small for me to work with, or that sort of thing?
Is it working? So there's not a cut and dry answer. The ADA, they're very particular on what is determined to be a disability. And so it's going to be a long string of back and forth conversation with, I guess, an individual of what the disability is and what the accommodation is going to be. I don't want to give any examples because it would out at something. So that's really what it would be about. The whole purpose of the ADA is to make somebody with a disability that's able to participate just like everybody else. Now, the iPad, it's used everywhere, as you guys know, and it's used with people with disabilities because it's so easy to use. I mean, you can make it bigger with the opposite of a pinch. So, and the whole purpose of the iPads are really for you guys to access, the agenda, the packets. If you have your email, the city email set up on it, and then maybe some research that you guys are doing. But that's really all that the iPads to you are supposed to be used for. I know there's multiple sizes of iPads, and that was one of the issues, is that it's too small to use. We can get a bigger iPad for the person, but again, that's what's the disability that requires the bigger iPad, And so that's what it is. It's not a cut and dry yes or no answer. It's going to be a back and forth of what is it and what can we do, I guess, to make it as accessible to the person with a disability as anybody who does not have a disability. So, yeah, and then that gets into then using a personal laptop. Yeah, they might be more comfortable using their own laptop. They bring in a bigger screen. But again, if the city is providing, electronics for them to use, they don't want to use that. Again, it gets down to, well, what's the disability? If you're just more comfortable with that, great. But the city is not going to now, be your IT support for your own personal laptop. If we brick it, meaning, if we install our own software on it and it crashes the computer, well, now are we liable? There's all those things too. And I know that was a discussion that we had at the beginning of everybody's term this time around too. So I guess that's really what I have to say about it.
Jim and then the mayor, or, okay.
I was just alerting.
Oh, okay. Jim?
I'm really uncomfortable with members of government having government/public information on personal devices. I don't like the iPad because the keyboard's too small for me, but I adapted, I used it. Is there a way for someone that needs it that the city could provide a low-end, which would be all you need, computer to those people that's city-owned instead of privately owned to do city business on? I would hate to have their computer taken away by subpoena for a month while somebody goes through it because they're looking for something that they think happened.
That'd probably be more of a question for CCIT. I know at the beginning of COVID, it was a mad scramble even to get laptops for employees. I don't know what that stock is at now, and
It might also be depend on like, are we willing to budget for that?
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
you guys get to vote on that budget. You
Yeah.
can say, hey,
That's an expense, you know, if everybody gets a laptop or.
yeah, but that wouldn't be an ADA request though, unless,
I wouldn't want a laptop. I mean, I can function with the iPad, but you can find some laptops that are getting close to iPad prices now for the basic, which all, just for what we need.
yeah. And that's more of a personal preference than an ADA thing. I mean, obviously, we know of, the typical disabilities of, being deaf or blind or being wheelchair bound, something like that, which wouldn't, I guess, not allow you to use an iPad versus a computer. So again, that's more of a preference thing, but there might be a disability out there that requires you to use a laptop over an iPad. I just can't think of
I would support giving, any way we can, in getting the proper equipment to the people that need it to work in city government.
Yeah.
And whether it's an iPad or a laptop, I mean, just so they don't use their personal equipment.
Becky?
Jeez, no, I had this great thing and now I forgot. Well, I just wanted, to Jim's point about not using personal devices, I believe a council rule, isn't it, Ann, that you can get your emails, you can take your iPhones up to CCIT and get your emails, that email app put on. I had it the first couple of terms. I haven't gotten up there with my new iPhone. But that went through council as, that was last term, I believe.
I'm not sure, I don't know how that went, I obviously wasn't here at that point, but they do put a little, like, a server on your phone, and that is where all of the public stuff goes. The other thought I have about the computer thing, if it's accommodating a person's needs, maybe it's one of those, like, well, you can just buy, a laptop instead of having the free iPad, it might be cheaper than it would be if you went to Best Buy, I don't know.
I'm good with whatever the committee wants, but I just want to make sure that they're safe and they're not going to be any legal problems with their personal equipment.
I mean, I guess I would have to understand, I mean, we've had members last term use their computers instead of iPads. And I don't know, I didn't pay attention, but that's what they did. Now, if we have, I mean, the only thing I can think of is I get my, you can get, this is an Outlook app for our emails. You can get your Outlook app on your personal thing, but that should all be on the server up there. So that shouldn't, what does it matter what vessel, I guess, you use for like emails if it's all on the server? There's nothing you could hide, correct?
Yeah, that's true. Everything's, CCIT backs up everything, so.
I took Jim's point more, though, to mean, is there any city-issued equipment available to accommodate people's preferences? It's certainly worth asking. I mean, whether it's, like you said, a city-issued laptop or iPad, or could they give you a bigger keyboard, or could they put something together that would just make it easier for, like you said, the officials to do their government work? I think that's worth asking. I have no idea what their inventory is like now, but then, yes, it would keep them off personal devices and still, I thought you were talking more about just using a larger keyboard than putting the email on your phone, or am I missing something?
But that was what I was really talking about, but now that you said that you would email on their phone,
Yeah,
is that a separate email account from your personal one?
Yes, it all is your ci.wa.
Oh, okay.
It's all that. So, and it all is backed up on the server. It's just a vessel. This is a vessel to get that. The iPad's a vessel. And you can download your app on your personal thing, but that's a vessel. But it all is in that. It's not mixed in with your personal email. It's all, and if something comes up for a request for records or open records request, that's all up in the server, correct, Ann? I mean, so, yeah, so it's not like, I think that's the way people were using them, is just, I'm more comfortable with that. I have my emails on this, my personal computer, and that hasn't been questioned before.
I think as long as it's a separate either software or separate account, I think we're safe then if it's on personal items, so. Thank you.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, it's, if you're gonna, if you're concerned about, open records requests, you know, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're doing work on this, you know, as long as you're using like your city resources, you're covered. Where you come into jeopardy is if you are, say, texting or messaging to other parties on official business outside of your city portal, then, but that's nothing that we as a body can do to prevent. I mean, we can say, you know, you've got your iPad or you bring your own computer to a meeting, you know, it's, if you're doing stuff outside of the city's workspace, then if there's a no, you just be aware that if there's a records request, you could be in jeopardy, so. I don't know if that's a rules issue or not. And I'm not sure where, you know, use of personal devices, I mean, we can encourage everybody, you know, you got an iPad, use your iPad for city business, and then it keeps everything nice and clean. It's, why muddy the waters by bringing your own, other than it's, you know, maybe some people feel it's more convenient, or they feel more comfortable with a laptop instead of the city issued device. At least that's my thinking. So I don't know if we have to take action on this, or if we can
You can probably mull it over for a
mull it
little
over,
bit too.
yeah.
I do think it would be good to remind everybody about the open records law, though.
Oh, yeah.
Just because, you know, if you think you're getting away with something by emailing on your personal account, you aren't.
Ann can testify to that, right, Ann? And that includes your Facebook Messenger, right, Ann? Yes, I was involved in that, you know, just from somebody else doing that, you know, messaging me, and we had to go through that with the attorneys, so it's no fun, and people shouldn't do it.
You're pushing people to Snapchat.
I don't know, that stuff's permanent too. Everything's. I don't know, before we move on to the next item, next meeting date, I know are there any, you know, we were, one of the reasons, you know, Nathan's here is for the ADA issues that were brought up. I don't know if we didn't really touch on those a whole lot. Is that something, it's not particularly, you know, an agendized item, but are there any items on the agenda that pertain to these issues that were brought up?
I was trying to keep my ear open, and some kind of sort of touched on, maybe tangentially, but I can see going forward that it's something that we need to address as an agenda item.
A future agenda item, or? I don't know if you-
So, I mean, the ADA, I mean, so I put together this little thing, but there wasn't obviously anything of, there's a specific rule for, you know, city governments. And actually, there was a nice handout, and it's in one of the links right at the bottom. It's literally called ADA and Small City Governments. And it's really just concerning itself of, you know, if you're a small government, you're having public meetings or events, that it just needs to be accessible to everyone. Whether that be, you know, electronic devices to help somebody hear better or see better, or the building itself needs to have, you know, curbs and gutters, you know, or ramps, you know, for them to be able to get in. That's really what it's concerning itself. So I didn't really have anything to talk about here with you guys today, because so far I think everything has been handled quite well. If there has been, you know, a reasonable accommodation request, I hear it, and then I work with, it's usually so far just been work with CCIT to then meet that request. And then that's really about it. so far, there hasn't been any violations. We meet quite often for ADA-related things, other parts of the city, and, yeah, I don't see any other really issue. We put our notices out there on all of our agendas of, if you do need some sort of reasonable accommodation, to request it either by email or phone, and then we meet it. Yeah.
Okay, in regards to technology issues, I mean, all of the meetings are open and available, streaming through a variety of sources too, so it's,
Yeah, like COVID actually did numbers for the ADA. I mean, we do more now because of COVID than we've done in the past, being more accessible. And I know I've talked with Ann and Leslie about it in the past when COVID started hitting, was we should probably just keep doing this, with the streaming and all that, WebEx being available, even if COVID goes away and we go back to pre-COVID, just because of ADA things and even not ADA things. It's just much more easier to access.
I have just a quick question.
Yep.
So one thing with the technology, so as the clerk, when I'm doing roll call, if someone has joined by WebEx, one of the alders, and I can see that what they're voting, yes or no, but I can't hear them because they have a technology issue, how is that supposed to be handled? Like, do we have to hear them say yes or no to allow that vote to take place?
okay. Yep, Becky?
I'll just give you my personal, I think it needs to be heard. I think it's not that I don't trust Leslie implicitly, I just want to make sure it is just for transparency for the public. They may not see, they may not hear, and we have, we live in an age where nobody trusts anybody, and they may think, well, that's going, it's basically protecting you, I think.
I would tend to agree. I mean, it's not, so that no vote is misconstrued. It's, when you have verbal confirmation. So I know we've had a few votes where with the person online wasn't able to voice their vote, or you couldn't hear it. So it's, I think we need some sort of physical confirmation.
And so you can't like unmute as like having administrative privileges in the WebEx or anything like that?
They changed it. We
So
used to be able to unmute and mute. Now we have to request that they unmute.
Okay.
There's probably some embarrassing things happening when the meeting chair was unmuting people. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. Okay. So that might just be an education issue. All right, we'll move on, number 7, determine and set next meeting date. Do we want to meet in a month, or meet in 2 weeks, or meet in 3 months, or?
I'm very flexible either way, so, just so it doesn't conflict with another meeting.
I mean, we've made some good headway here, but I know there's other issues. 2 months?
Would 2 months be good? I mean, we don't want to do it too soon. We want to get some of that information on other communities, what they're doing with some things we were talking about. And a month might be kind of close, so.
2 months would make this mid-March.
Unless we see some problem come about before that.
And if we have a retreat, weren't the dates sometime in February? So then we can talk about the council norms there and.
So maybe 2 months would be appropriate, meet after the council retreat, and then, so we could get some feedback to take to the Rules Committee. Okay. I don't know, Leslie, do you just want to poll everybody 2 months out?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
I move to adjourn.
Item number 8, adjournment. Move, second. Neil, all those in favor? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.